Hi and welcome to Spiritual Travelling with Ellie. Today I have Graham Nicholls with me, who is running a workshop soon at the London College of Spirituality in out-of-body experiences. He's also an artist and has travelled a lot and works with lots of different spiritual areas, so we're going to have a very interesting conversation today. Welcome to the show, Graham. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Let's go straight in with the topic of the day, the out-of-body experiences. So I'd love to hear about that, and there's a lot to talk about. I read on your website that you've actually been having out-of-body experiences and working with them for over 20 years now.
Well, I had my first experience when I was about 12.
Wow,
I'm
really
now
young.
33, so...
Wow! Should we start at the beginning? Tell us about, you go back and tell us about that first one.
Well, I mean, the very beginning was I started to have strange sort of experiences when I was about 5 to 7 years old.
Yeah.
Very,
That's very young.
And the first ever experience that I remember very clearly was seeing an apparition in the hallway of the flat I grew up in.
Wow.
And that was sort of like an opening, if you like, opened a threshold.
Yeah.
After that, I started having more and more perceptions and strange things happening, kind of thing. But then, sort of fast forward to 12, and I started having experiences of being a few feet vertically, a few feet above the ground,
wow.
Like out of my body. And they'd only last maybe a few seconds, sort of, or maximum maybe a minute or something like that. They were just really fleeting experiences. But obviously, I was like, "What's going on here? What's this?"
So you weren't aware at the time of what was happening?
No, I'd never really heard of anything like that. I think it was about 6 months later or something like that.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary or something on the TV that was talking about astral projection, I think.
Wow.
So I went to a bookshop just off of Oxford Street, just to have a look around to see what they had, and they just had one book that was about out-of-body experiences from a parapsychological angle. So I bought that.
Okay, so they were self-induced, that you could actually bring them on?
Well, I pieced together some techniques that I'd read in the back of the book I'd bought, and the idea was to try and induce them, and have a longer, more in-depth experience.
Yeah.
So.
So it had been positive, the first one.
The first few
for you to want
small
to revisit.
Yeah, they were really.
Is it frightening though?
Let me go through the story.
Yeah.
When I got worked out those techniques, I spent the next 6 months going through the techniques, and eventually I had my first sort of induced, sort of full experience, if you like.
Yeah.
And in that experience, I found myself floating directly above my body.
Could you see?
Yeah, I could see my body, and the whole room was sort of lit up, which seemed to be coming from my body. Like there was an energy, like a light coming off of my body. So the whole room had a kind of hue from me.
Yeah.
And I could see my body, but I could only move as if there was like a pole running through me, and I could only move like rotating.
Wow.
I couldn't go vertical, and I couldn't, move in the other direction.
Wow.
So I was so it felt kind of constricted.
Yeah.
I suppose, so it wasn't completely positive at that point. But I knew what the other experiences had been like.
Yeah.
And I also sensed that there was a lot that could happen with this. So I persevered with it and gradually managed to move more, and then get out of my bedroom and move further afield. So it was sort of a gradual process from that point on.
So when you say, I think for someone who's never had that experience, I feel kind of like desperate to be able to not contextualize it, but I want to know, what can you see? How does that feel like? And it must be so hard to put into words in a way, but when you say you leave, say, the bedroom, you go further afield, can you see things from above, like exactly how they are, or what's
it really varies with the experience. Some experiences there's a kind of colour that predominates, like maybe blue or some colour. So all my vision will be tinted in a particular colour.
Yeah.
In another experience, it will almost look like heat sensors. You know, when you see those cameras that show how something looks with heat, so you can see reds and yellows and blues. You know, I've had experiences like that where buildings seem to have energies coming out of them as if they've accumulated energy over time, like a battery or something.
That's fascinating.
So it really depends. And then in other experiences, things can look very normal how they do now. You know. So,
what do you think causes it to be different each time? Is it something to do with a mood you could be in, or is this some of this somehow controlled by spirit, or what do you think changes the framework of what you experience?
I think it's to do with the level of consciousness that you've got into at that particular point in time. Because like with most things, there's times when you're more focused or less focused. And there's times when maybe you've worked yourself into a very deep state. So when that happens, the really deep states seem to be the ones that have the real accuracy, and things look, you know, you can find information and see things as they are much more. So
do you sort of really meditate on that before you enter it? When you sit, are there certain things that you have to do to get into a deeper state?
Yeah, there's a process of techniques that I'll use, or things that the way I look at it is you can make the scenario conducive to having the experience. Rather than looking at it as literally I'm doing these techniques and this will happen.
Exactly.
It's a little bit more fluid than that. You have to be more malleable. So I'll set up the conditions and I'll go through a process. The key thing is the vibrations. People often talk about vibrations. I call them kind of energy waves. I have this, before I have an experience, I tend to get a feeling of energy or waves going through my body. And that is the signal that I could have an experience that night. It's normally in the evenings. So when I get that, I will focus and try to work on my breathing and go through a process to try and help the process along.
So it's not always induced from you. Does it sometimes just you feel it coming on and then you can go with that?
Well, like I said, I mean, I set up things to be conducive. I don't. You can force an experience to happen, but it's usually a very weak, uninteresting experience if you do that. So the way I tend to work is I tend to be aware of my own state and my own energies. And if at a particular point I can sense things are attuned, if you like, then I'll go with it. That's the best way of doing it, I've found, because when I try to force an experience, it's normally very short and not very interesting. It's probably not worth doing in a sense.
So in terms of a time scale, what's the short experience and what's the long one?
Well, the average short experience can only be a matter of minutes, but the average is maybe about 20 minutes.
Does it feel like 20 minutes? What does it feel like?
It varies. I've had up to 12 hours.
Wow. So that's a really long one. And
it's probably the longest ever, I would think.
Are you while you're in it, are you conscious of time? Are you thinking, God, I've been here for ages, this is great?
You're conscious of time, but it's not necessarily accurate to time is really passing. It can sort of go slower in reality or faster in reality.
It's almost like a dream state. I have really